Well, hello everyone. My name is Alison Woodall and I'm a relocation specialist. That means I get to help you with the financial, logistical and emotional issues that make moving to a new state so stressful. And if you have checked out the Leaving California YouTube channel, you will have seen several of my interviews where I've discussed all kinds of issues related to relocating to a new state with experts and real estate professionals. But I thought today I would share just a little bit about me, who I am, why I love to travel, and why my family moves to a new state every 2 to 3 years. And also I want to talk to you about how you can plan an amazing road trip, whether it's a road trip to visit a state that you think you might want to move to, or whether you've actually planned your where you're relocating to and you're ready to plan an amazing road trip that begins that new life as you move across the country with all your stuff to start your new life. So a little bit about me. As you can tell from my accent, I was born in England. I was raised there and I moved to the USA when I was 25 and I've lived here ever since. I just kept my accent because people like it and it was just too hard to change at the age of 25. But I grew up on a sheep farm in northern England. My dad's family has actually lived on the same farm for the last 200 years and they still live there right now. But when my dad was in his early 20s, he left the family farm just like the previous generation had done and spent a couple of years traveling. And he chose to travel and work in South Africa. My mom did exactly the same, except she left South Africa where she was born and raised and came to England and worked in London for a couple of years. And then on Friday the 13th, when my mom was back in South Africa and my dad was a few weeks away from a huge epic trip all the way up the east coast of Africa, they met at a party and the rest is history. So I grew up in England on a farm with an English dad and a South African mother. So why am I telling you this? Partly so you can see where I got my love of traveling from, but also so that you can understand the impact that you have on your children. Our children are far more impacted by the way that you live your life than anything that you will ever tell them. And so I knew as I was growing up that I would spend several years traveling when I grew up, and that's exactly what I did. But what is it that you are showing to your children? Are you demonstrating to them how to be brave and how to move to another state for a work opportunity, for a lower cost of living, or just a better life? Even if you're anxious or doubtful or unsure, are you showing them that you're someone who will find a way and make a way and live your life the way you want to, no matter what the obstacles are? That's what you want to be modeling for your children, not fear and indecision and doubt. If you want to leave your state but you give in to fear, indecision and frustration, then you're showing them that your dreams are not worth chasing because they will follow the same path that you do. I knew that I was going to go traveling as soon as I was old enough, and that because that's what my parents had done, and that's exactly what I did. I want you to use your children as a reason to be brave, not as an excuse to stay stuck where you are right now. My parents continue to live very simply and very cheaply, and every 4 to 6 years they splurge on a big vacation somewhere amazing in the world. And I didn't realize just how much that model for traveling had impacted me until my husband told me after we'd been living in Georgia for 15 years that he wanted to do something different. He lived in Georgia his whole life. At the time, it was very traumatic leaving the life that I'd lived for 15 years and the home that I thought was going to be my forever home in Georgia. But once we'd made that break, I realized how amazing life was. We basically redesigned our whole life based on my parents' model, that we live and work somewhere in a new state for 2 to 3 years. And then we take a couple of months off to travel before my husband starts his next job in a new state. And so far, it's been amazing. I'm very lucky I get to work from home. So as long as I have an internet connection, my job is very flexible. And that may sound strange to only stay with a company for 2 to 3 years. But when you work with a company for such a short time, your results have to be outstanding because you have to have good enough results that your next company wants to hire you based on what you've achieved in your current job. And because you need strong connections with your industry to find your next job, you network and you focus much more intently on building an excellent reputation in your industry. And all of these things make you such a valuable employee. So if you're thinking that there is no way that you could live your life like that, I can promise you can. Even if we were on a much smaller budget, we would still live our life the same way, because my father-in-law always likes to say, it's not actually how much money you earn, it's how much money you spend that makes the difference. So we save hard and we focus on our career for the 2 to 3 years that we're in a state. And then my husband lines up his next job in whatever state we want to move to, and he sets his start date for 6 to 8 weeks after he finishes his current job. And in every situation, when he's explained to his future employer why he needs to set that start date further out, he's been treated with a mix of amazement, enviousness, and congratulations for being brave enough to live his life just a little bit differently. There are so many people who are stuck in a job, stuck in a life that doesn't fulfill them, and they're just not brave enough to be able to step out of that comfort zone and live just a little bit differently. If you have a new job lined up already, speak to that future employer. Ask them if you can push your start date out just a couple of weeks so that you can take a vacation of a lifetime or turn that drive to your new state into an amazing road trip. If a road trip is not your thing, maybe a month at a beach or at a resort sounds much more appealing. We actually spent a month in South Africa before we moved to Florida. So you can use that break before you start a new job to do whatever you want, to follow your dreams and to make your life amazing. But in this video, I want to focus specifically on taking a road trip. I could talk about planning big adventures for hours, but you probably don't have enough time to watch all of that. So the new life that you've been dreaming about for so long starts the moment that you leave your current home. I have to say, I always feel just a little bit sad when I see people proudly posting in Facebook groups about how they're jumping on a plane with their kids to fly to start their new life while their husband drives as fast as possible, with all their possessions in a truck, because it usually is the husband. I always feel that that's just an amazing opportunity that has been missed. I know that money isn't usually tight because moving is extremely expensive. You may have a deadline to start a new job, or you may just hate road trips, or you're just excited to start your new life. But not taking a road trip is a huge missed opportunity to make memories with your kids or your spouse and to explore this amazing country. If your move is several months away, I would urge you to save just a little bit more money to plan for a road trip and to take just a little bit longer if you can possibly ask your new employer to push out your start date a couple of weeks. And then challenge yourself to plan the most amazing road trip that combines all the things that you love. Maybe a little bit of adventure, some days just relaxing and doing nothing, and stopping off at all the places that you've always wanted to visit. So how do you plan a road trip? The steps are always the same, whether it's a 1-day road trip, a 2-day road trip, or a 6-week epic cross-country adventure. The first thing is deciding what you want from that trip. Do you want it to be relaxing? Do you want it to be exploring? Or do you just want to focus on making family memories? Your goal should always be to do more of the things that you love, whatever that is. When you're exhausted physically, mentally, and emotionally from packing up and leaving, planning a road trip can seem like just another burden. But if you focus on making it fun and decide what you want from the road trip, it is much easier. When we planned our 6-week road trip from Florida to California, I knew I wanted to see as many national parks as possible. I'm actually on a mission right now to see all the national parks in the USA. I've seen all 50 states, so my next thing on my adventure list is seeing all the national parks. So that was my goal. My son wanted to do as many adventure tours as possible and 4-wheeler tours. My daughter wanted to ride horses as many times as possible. And my husband wanted to see mountains and go fishing. So we just looked at all the places that we could do those things on our trip, and those were the goals. By each of us doing something that we enjoyed, we would make amazing family memories. So that's step 1, deciding what you want from the trip. Step 2 is to decide the most direct route to your state. And then look at the map and see if there's any places close by that you to the route that you want to take that you want to visit. And when I say close, I mean within 2 to 3 hours away from that route that you're taking. Are there any places that your kids would enjoy visiting? If they're older, the more involved you can get them in planning the route, the more they're going to enjoy it. If they're little, you may need to guide them and say, "Ooh, look, there's a place where we can go, ride horses or see dinosaurs or whatever it is that they love." The more involved they are, the more excited they'll be. And then when you've looked at all the places near to your route that you want to go and visit, you can actually plot the best route between all of those places that you want to see. I do understand if you are driving a rental truck or, towing a trailer or traveling in convoy with family and friends, maybe you need to get to your new home as quickly as possible so you're not spending an absolute fortune on a rental truck. But in that situation, I would say, could you plan your overnight stops or lunch stops in scenic towns or places that would make the trip just a little bit more enjoyable? And could you maybe take a route that is just slightly longer but maybe more scenic? Maybe taking Route 66 for part of the way rather than going on I-40 the whole way. So once you've roughed out the places that you want to visit and the route that you want to take, step 3 is to do an online search for the top 10 things to do in the towns that you're going to drive through. Because once you start searching for all those places en route, you'll find out there's a ton more things that you want to stop off and see, or maybe there's a restaurant that you want to visit, or there's a park that you want to stop and have, a picnic lunch at. The more research that you do about the places en route, the more interesting your road trip is going to be. If you want to actually mark them on your phone, you can go into Google Maps and you can create categories. And then when you find something, a place that you want to visit, you can mark it on your map and save it in one of those categories. And then it just allows you, it'll put little pins on your Google Maps and then you can plan your route between them. Or if you're looking for, restaurants that you thought you might like, then it'll automatically pull those places up on Google Maps. So that's just a really good tip. And if you imagine that when you get to your new state and you start your new life, you want a more relaxed pace of living. Maybe you dream of having coffee in the morning with your spouse instead of racing out of the door to get to work. Start living that kind of life on the way. Plan to have, coffee in the morning at a cute little coffee shop if you can find one. If you imagine that you're going to take long walks with your spouse or with your kids, try and find hotels that are near parks and start your day off with a long walk before you start driving. Or maybe you stop off en route and go hiking. If you imagine that you and your spouse are going to be closer when you move and you're going to have date nights, try and find some nice restaurants en route and plan a date night. Start living the life that you want to have in your new state the moment that you leave your current home. And then that takes you to step 4, which is to figure out your preferred drive time each day and then break your route into chunks. I know that my kids are going to happily sit in the car for 4 to 5 hours. So when we plan our route and break it up into chunks, that's how long we plan. If your kids are younger, you may need to have much shorter driving times. You basically can break that route up into chunks that suit you. I would also advise you that some of the days you're going to have long drives. When we left Georgia, we drove a couple of very, very long days because we knew there was nothing in the Midwest that we wanted to see. We wanted to see mountains, so we wanted to get to Colorado and the mountains as fast as possible. So look at the route that you've planned out and decide how long you can drive each day and where you want to break up your stops. That's step number 4. So now you know your route, you know how many hours you're going to drive each day, you know where you're going to stay and what you want to do. So step number 5 is to figure out your budget. We stay in really cheap hotels. We rarely eat out and we stop every couple of mornings at a grocery store and buy all the stuff we need for breakfasts and lunches and snacks and drinks. Don't stop off at gas stations buying snacks and drinks. It gets so expensive. Try and buy them ahead of time at a grocery store. That's how we keep to a budget, because we want to spend all our money on doing things, riding four-wheelers, riding horseback riding. That's where we like to spend our money, on doing things. And often you'll find the cheaper hotels have free breakfasts, which saves you even more money. But how you spend your money is entirely up to you. If you love to eat out, that may be where you spend your budget. You will plan your stops based on great restaurants, and that feels like a splurge. If that makes your road trip feel amazing, spend your money that way. If you're if you want your trip to be more relaxing, maybe you want to spend your money on staying in luxury hotels. If you have a time crunch because you've got to get to your new state as fast as possible because you're driving a rental truck or maybe you're towing a trailer, staying in a slightly more luxurious hotel is probably a good idea. It'll make your trip feel more special, and also you're less likely to have your truck or your trailer broken into if you're staying in a nicer hotel. But most importantly, when you look back on your trip, it's going to be the memories that you make doing things, seeing things, having experiences. It's not going to be staying in the cheap hotels or eating sandwiches every time for lunch that you remember. You remember the memories that you've made. So once you know where you want to stop and what your budget is, step 6 is to look for hotels. We travel with our dog, so often our night stops are based on where the nearest La Quinta hotel is. They are pretty cheap, they're reasonably clean, and they have no pet fee, and most of them serve you a free breakfast. So a La Quinta suits all of our needs. You can also search tripadvisor.com, which is one of my favorite websites for hotel reviews, or just do, an online review to check that the hotel, that you want to stay at is reasonable. If you're traveling at peak times, I would definitely recommend that you book hotels along the route. Maybe not every night, because sometimes your route will change, particularly if your road trip is long. But if you're traveling in a truck and towing a trailer, you may want to know that you're staying in a good hotel. If you are staying somewhere scenic, or if you're traveling at a peak time, then maybe you want to book a hotel ahead so that you can get the room with the mountain view or the lake view. And knowing that you have somewhere to stay just minimizes a little bit of the stress of a road trip. So now your trip is all planned out and you can get excited. The next steps are all about making the trip as easy as possible and lots of fun. Step number 7 is packing only the essentials. There is nothing worse than having to drag suitcases and coolers and bags in and out of hotels and packing up every single morning and unpacking every night. It is exhausting. When we travel, we each have a roller bag, and then my daughter and I also have an extra bag because girls just seem to travel with more stuff than boys for some reason. But that way we can put our bags on our backpacks on our back, and we can tow our bags. We also have a cooler on wheels, not a huge cooler, just enough for snacks and drinks. That way we don't need luggage carts and everybody can carry their own stuff. This is especially important if your kids are younger. Make them carry their own bag, make them pull their own bag on wheels. They will feel independent and grown up and so much more special, and it's one less thing for you to worry about. I would also encourage you, if your road trip is quite long, to pack darker clothes that you don't have to wash regularly, and don't take anything that needs ironing or dry cleaning. It's just going to get crumpled up and not look nice. So that's my step number 7, is pack only the essentials for your trip. And then step number 8 is important if you're traveling with children or with family members. You want to give everybody in your party or in your group a responsibility. Even if your kids are little, like I say, they can carry something. So when we were on our road trip, my son, because he's 14 and likes to show off his muscles, he was responsible for unloading everything from the back of my truck when we got to a hotel, and then loading up in the morning. He was also responsible for the cooler. So in the morning before we left, he filled it with ice. My daughter was responsible for the dog. So when we got to the hotel, it was her job to get him out of the truck and take him to use the restroom and carry all his bowls and food and to feed him. My job is always making sandwiches. I just accept that. If I want to travel on a budget, I just have to make sure food is taken care of. I also tend to plan the trip and find out all the fun things to do on the way and ask my kids, do you want to do this? Or what about that? And then my husband, he decides the fun things we do, and then he does most of the driving. And when you just have responsibilities, it makes traveling so much easier, because you get to a hotel and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And then when you're packing up in the morning, everybody knows what they're supposed to do as well. So it just makes it a little easier. And then step 9, I think, is often the most important step, but it's also the easiest to forget after the exhaustion and stress of packing up a home and leaving for your new state. And that is to make the drive fun. Even on the best planned trips, something's going to go wrong. You may have booked a hotel that's noisy or not as clean as you would like. Maybe you have a truck issue. Maybe someone forgets something, and everybody's going to be tired, which is why the rest days and planning for some relaxation is so important. But if you're spending that much time in a car together, especially if you aren't used to it, it can be very tiring and you'll all start to get on each other's nerves. But we have a theme song for every road trip that we take, and we play that song as soon as we get in the car in the morning and start driving, because it just lifts our spirits and it focuses on the fact that we're supposed to be having fun and enjoying ourselves. We also listen to audiobooks, we play our favorite music playlists, we talk about things we love, we relive happy memories, and we play car games. And unless the road is very long and very boring, we have a no screen rule, because you miss so much if you're not looking out of the windows. I also will do online searches and get my kids involved. If we know that we're coming up to a town that has history, I'll get them, learning a little bit about where we're going to be visiting next, because it just makes the trip come alive. It makes it a little bit more interesting. But as parents, you set the tone for the trip. If you sit on your phone when you're in the passenger seat, not engaging with your kids while they sit in the back of the vehicle watching a movie that they've probably seen 10 or 12 times, that trip is going to be really boring. It does take effort to plan things to do in the car, to find a song that you want to be like your road trip song, to talk to your kids, to entertain them, but it is so worth it. The memories that you will build with your children and the experiences that you'll have on a long road trip are just amazing. So it is worth putting in the effort. And then the final step, step 10, is purely practical. You need to get your vehicle serviced before you leave. It needs to be in the best possible shape for a long road trip. And your tires as well. You have to make sure your tires are in great shape and your spare. If you're towing anything, you need to make sure that the tires on your trailer or whatever you're towing are in great shape too, and that you have a spare. If you've never changed a tire, practice before you leave. There is nothing worse than changing a tire for the first time in your life at the side of the road, maybe at night when you're racing to get to your next stop. Don't do it. Be prepared. And if you can pay for roadside assistance, that's great. Do it. It'll give you peace of mind. But just know that if you get a flat tire or you break down, you need to try and change that tire yourself, because roadside assistance can take a long time. So that is it. Those are my 10 steps to planning an epic road trip. Number 1, decide the goal of your trip. Number 2, look at the most direct route that you can take to wherever you're going, to your new state or to the states that you think you might want to move to. And then look at all the places around that route that would be fun to visit. When you've decided the route that you want to take, do an online search for the top 10 things to do in those cities or those states that you're going to be driving through, so that you can make your route more interesting, you can make your stops more interesting. Step 4, figure out your preferred drive time each day and break your route down into daily chunks. Step 5, figure out your budget. Step 6, once you know where you want to stop, look for hotels. Step 7, pack only the essentials. Step 8, give everyone a responsibility, especially if you're traveling with children. And then step 9, the most important one, make sure your trip is fun. Focus on fun. And step 10, which probably should be the most important one, make sure your vehicle and all the tires are in the best shape possible. Planning a road trip sounds like a lot to do, particularly when you think there's 10 steps, but you can plan the basic route in about an hour or so, and then spend a little time each day booking hotels, refining the things that you want to do, and just making the trip as much fun as possible. And then once your trip is planned, you've got to get into the right mindset to enjoy it. Moving to a new state is your chance to change, to become the best version of yourself, and to start living your life just a little differently. Do you want to be someone who is less stressed out, who's more relaxed, less of a perfectionist? Maybe you want to worry a little bit less and just live in the moment and enjoy life more. All of those things you can start doing when you start your road trip. You aren't just moving to a new state, you are building a whole new life. So start living the life that you've always wanted as soon as you leave your current home and get started on that road trip. And if you feel fearful about leaving family and friends behind, do what I do and focus all your energy on the ways to maintain and build relationships. Don't waste time worrying about what you'll lose. Focus all your time and your energy on planning amazing family vacations, on staying in touch with the people that you've left behind. My family is spread out all over the world, and we may be physically far apart, but emotionally we're very, very close. So you can have that same kind of relationship with your family that you leave in the state that you're moving from. It just takes a bit of work and a bit of effort. My family is proof that it does work and you can stay connected even when you're physically far apart. And remember, you set the example for your kids and also for other family members and friends. Be brave, make bold decisions, follow your dreams, and build a life that you love and that you're proud of. And you will inspire so many people along the way, as well as living a life that you just can't imagine how much you will love your life when you do the things that you really want to do. So what are you waiting for? And if you need just a little bit of guidance and a little bit of help, wherever you're watching this video, in the comments below, I will actually post a guide that accompanies this video that has the 10 steps and kind of my top tips for planning a road trip. So get to it, get planning and start living the life that you've always wanted to.